Now, we come to the end of the Rains Retreat, 1930. During that third rainy season, I had told myself, you're going to have to leave Bangkok. There's no two ways about it. If your preceptor stands in your way, there'll have to be a falling out. So I made a wish. May the triple gem and all the sacred things in the cosmos help me find another way out. Another night, toward the end of the rains, I had been lying on my back, reading a book and meditating at the same time. When I fell asleep, I dreamed that Ajahn Mun came to scold me. "What are you doing in Bangkok?" he asked. "Go out into the forest." "I can't," I answered. "My preceptor won't let me." Ajahn Mun answered with a single word. "Go." So I dedicated a resolution to him. At the end of the rains, may Ajahn Mun come and take me with him out of this predicament. It was just a few days later that Chow Kun Upali broke his leg, and Ajahn Mun came down to pay his respects to him. A short while after that, Lady Noi, the mother of Chow Phra Mukhamontri, passed away, and the funeral services were to be held at Wat Debsarin. Because Lady Noi had been one of Ajahn Mun's supporters when he was staying in Udon Thani, he made a point of attending her funeral. My preceptor and I were also invited, and I met Ajahn Mun up on the crematorium. I was overjoyed but had no chance to have even a word with him, so I asked Chow Kun Phra Amarabirakit where Ajahn Mun was staying, and he answered, "At Wat Boromnivasa." On the way home from the funeral, I got permission from my preceptor to stop at Wat Boromnivasa to pay my respects to Ajahn Mun. In the 4 years since my reordination, this was my first encounter with Ajahn Mun. After I'd paid my respects, he delivered a short sermon to me on the text, Kina Jati Vusitam Brahmakaryanti, which he translated in short as, "The noble ones, having freed themselves from the mental effluence, find happiness. This is the supreme holy life." That's all I can remember of it, but I felt that sitting and listening to him speak for a few moments gave my heart more peace than it had felt all the years I had been practicing on my own. In the end, he told me, "You'll have to come with me this time. As for your preceptor, I'll inform him myself." That was our entire conversation. I bowed down to him and returned to Wat Srapatham. When I told my preceptor about my meeting with Ajahn Mun, he simply sat very still. The next day, Ajahn Mun came to Wat Srapatham and spoke with my preceptor, saying that he wanted to have me go with him up north. My preceptor gave his assent. I began to get my necessary belongings together and to say goodbye to my friends and the temple boys. I asked one of the boys how much money I had left for my travel expenses, and he told me, 30 satang. That wasn't even enough to pay for the ride to Hua Lamphong station, which by that time had risen to 50 satang. So I went to inform Ajahn Mun, and he assured me that he would take care of everything. The day before Lady Noi's cremation, Ajahn Mun was invited to deliver a sermon at the home of Chow Phra Mukhamontri, and afterwards received the following donations: a set of robes, a container of kerosene, and 80 baht. Later, Ajahn Mun told me that the set of robes he gave to a monk at Wat Boromnivasa, the kerosene he gave to Phra Mahasombun, and the money he gave to people who needed it, leaving just enough for 2 people's travelling expenses, his and mine. After a while, when Chow Kun Upali finally let Ajahn Mun return north, we took the train to Uttaradit, where we stayed at Wat Salyafong, a temple founded by Chow Kun Upali himself. Before getting on the express train at Hua Lamphong station, we ran into Mae Ngao Nedjamnong, who had come down to Bangkok, whether it was to attend Lady Noi's funeral, or what, I don't know. Mae Ngao was one of Ajahn Mun's old students, and she agreed to help look after our needs during the entire trip. This was the period when Ajahn Tan was abbot of Wat Salyafong. We stayed there a number of days and then went to stay in the groves behind the temple, quite a ways from the monks' quarters. This was a quiet, secluded place, both by day and by night. One day, I got into a disagreement with Ajahn Mun, and he drove me away. Although I felt riled, I decided not to let my feelings show, so I stayed on with him, attending to his needs, as I always had. The next morning, this was in early January toward the end of the 2nd lunar month, 2 monks came looking for Ajahn Mun with the news that one of his followers was seriously ill in Chiang Mai. The 2 monks then continued on down to Bangkok, after which Ajahn Mun and I left Uttaradit for Chiang Mai. When we arrived, we went to stay at Wat Chedi Luang, Great Chedi Temple. The ill follower turned out to be a layman, Nai Biu of San Kampeng district, who had become mentally deranged. His older brother and sister-in-law brought him to Wat Chedi Luang, and Ajahn Mun cured him with meditation. That year, I spent the rains retreat at Wat Chedi Luang. When we had first arrived, there were quite a number of our fellow meditation monks staying at the temple, but as the rains approached, they left one by one to stay in the hills. At first, Ajahn Mun was going to have me leave for the hills too, but I refused to go. I told him I had my heart set on staying with him and attending to his needs throughout the rainy season. In the end, he gave his consent. That was 1931, the year Chao Kunupali died. I spent the rains very close to Ajahn Mun, attending both to his needs and to my own meditation. He in turn gave me a thorough breaking in every way. Each evening he had me climb up and sit in meditation on the north side of the Great Chedi. There was a large Buddha image there. It's still there today. And Ajahn Mun told me that it was a very auspicious spot, that relics of the Buddha had been known to come there often. I did as I was told in every way. Some nights I'd sit all night, without any sleep. We stayed in a small hut in a banana grove. Lady Thip and Luang Yong, the chief of police, had had the hut built and presented to Ajahn Mun Nai Thip, clerk in the provincial treasury, and his wife, Nang Ta, made sure that Ajahn Mun had plenty to eat every day. I made a regular practice of going with Ajahn Mun when we went out for alms. As we would walk along, he'd constantly be giving me lessons in meditation all along the way. If we happened to pass a pretty girl, he'd say, "Look over there. Do you think she's pretty? Look closely. Look down into her insides." No matter what we passed, houses or roads, he'd always make it an object lesson. At the time, I was only 26. It was my 5th rains retreat, and I was still feeling young, so he was always giving me lessons and warnings. He seemed very concerned for my progress. But there was one thing that had me puzzled, having to do with robes and other requisites that people would donate. He seemed reluctant to let me have anything nice to use. Sometimes he'd ask for whatever nice things I did have, and then go give them to someone else. I had no idea what he meant by all this. Whenever I'd get anything new or nice, he'd order me to wash and dye it to spoil the original color. Say I'd get a nice new white handkerchief or towel. He'd order me to dye it brown with dye from the heartwood of a jackfruit tree. Sometimes he'd have to order me several times, and when I still wouldn't obey, he'd go ahead and dye the things himself. He liked to find old, worn-out robes, patch them himself, and then give them to me to wear. One morning, I went together with him on our alms round down past the police station. We happened to pass a woman carrying goods to the market, but my mind was in good shape. It didn't stray away from the path we were following. I was keeping complete control over myself. Another time, when I was walking a little distance behind him, he walked fast, but I walked slowly. I saw him come to an old, worn-out pair of policemen's trousers thrown away by the side of the road. He began to kick the trousers along, back and forth. I was thinking all along that I had to keep my thoughts on the path I was following. Finally, when he reached the fence around the police station, he stooped down, picked up the trousers, and fastened them under his robes. I was puzzled. What did he want with old trash like that? When we got back to the hut, he placed the trousers over the clothes railing. I swept up and then set out the sitting mats. After we had finished our meal, I went into his room to arrange his bedding. Some days he'd be cross with me, saying I was messy, that I never put anything in the right place. But he'd never tell me what the right places were. Even though I tried my best to please him at all times, he was still severe with me the entire rainy season. Several days later, the old pair of trousers had become a shoulder bag and a belt. I saw them hanging together on the wall. And a few days afterwards, he gave them to me to use. I took them and looked at them. They were nothing but stitches and patches. With all the good things available, why did he give me this sort of stuff to use? Attending to Ajahn Mun was very good for me, but also very hard. I had to be willing to learn everything anew. To be able to stay with him for any length of time, you had to be very observant and very circumspect. You couldn't make a sound when you walked on the floor. You couldn't leave footprints on the floor. You couldn't make noise when you swallowed water or opened the windows or doors. There had to be a science to everything you did. Hanging out robes, taking them in, folding them up, setting out sitting mats, arranging bedding, everything. Otherwise he'd drive you out, even in the middle of the rains retreat. Even then, You just have to take it and try to use your powers of observation. Every day after our meal, I'd go to straighten up his room, putting away his bowl and robes, setting out his bedding, his sitting cloth, his spittoon, his tea kettle, pillow, etc. I had to have everything in order before he entered the room. When I had finished, I'd take note of where I had placed things, hurry out of the room, and go to my own room, which was separated from his by a wall of banana leaves. I had made a small hole in the wall so that I could peek through and see both Ajahn Mun and his belongings. When he came into the room, he'd look up and down, inspecting his things. Some of them he'd pick up and move, others he'd leave where they were. I had to watch carefully and take note of where things were put. The next morning, I'd do it all over again, trying to place things where I had seen him put them himself. Finally, one morning, when I had finished putting things in order and returned to my own room to peek through the hole, he entered his room, sat still for a minute, looked right and left, up and down, all around, and didn't touch a thing. He didn't even turn over his sleeping cloth. He simply said his chants, and then took a nap. Seeing this, I felt really pleased that I had attended to my teacher to his satisfaction. In other matters, such as sitting and walking meditation, Ajahn Mun trained me in every way to my complete satisfaction. But I was able to keep up with him at best only about 60% of the time. At the end of the Rains retreat, Wat Boromnivasa arranged Chowkun Upali's funeral, and nearly all the senior monks in Wat Chedi Luang went down to Bangkok to help the abbot had Ajahn Mun watch over the temple in his absence. After the funeral was over, a letter came to Ajahn Mun, giving him permission to become a preceptor. When Ajahn Mun opened the letter, he found there was more. The letter asked him, in addition to becoming preceptor, to accept the position of abbot at Wat Chedi Luang Chow Kayo Nawarat, Prince Ninejules, the Prince of Chiang Mai, was to make all the necessary arrangements. Would Ajahn Mun please take over the duties of the previous abbot? That, in short, was the gist of the letter. When Ajahn Mun finished reading it, he sent for me. "I have to leave Wat Chedi Luang," he said. 2 days after the end of the Rains retreat, he had sent me out on my own to a mountain in Lampun province, a spot where he himself had once stayed. I camped a little more than 10 days at the foot of the mountain until one day at about 3 in the afternoon, while I was sitting in meditation, there was an incident. It was as if someone had come with a message. I heard a voice say, "Tomorrow you have to go stay up on top of the mountain." The next day, before climbing to the top, I went to stay in an old abandoned temple, said to be very sacred. People had told me that whenever the lunar Sabbath came around, a bright light would often appear there. It was deep in the forest, though, and the forest was full of elephants and tigers. I walked in alone, feeling both brave and scared, but confident in the power of the Dhamma and of my teacher. I stayed for 2 nights. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, at about 1 or 2 in the morning, a tiger came, which meant that I didn't get any sleep the whole night I sat in meditation, scared stiff, while the tiger walked around and around my umbrella tent. My body felt all frozen and numb. I started chanting, and the words came out like running water. All the old chants I had forgotten now came back to me, thanks both to my fear and to my ability to keep my mind under control. I sat like this from 2 until 5 a.m, when the tiger finally left. The next morning, I went for alms in a small village of only 2 households. One of the owners was out working in his garden, and when he saw me, he told me that a tiger had come and eaten one of his oxen the night before. This made me even more scared, so finally, after my meal, I climbed to the top of the mountain. From the top, looking out, you could see the chedi of Wat Phra Datu Haribhunjai in the town of Lampun. The mountain was named Doi Khao Mao, Thumb Mountain. At its summit was a deep spring, so deep that no one has ever been able to fathom it. The water was crystal clear and surrounded by heads of old Buddha images. Climbing down about 2 meters from ground level, you reach the surface of the water. They say that a person who falls into the spring won't sink, and that you can't go diving down under the water. Women are absolutely forbidden to go into the spring, for if a woman does happen to enter the water, she'll go into convulsions. People in the area consider the whole mountain to be sacred. Ajahn Mun had told me that there was an important spirit dwelling in the mountain, but that it wouldn't harm or disturb me because it was acquainted with the Dhamma and Sangha. The first day after reaching the top, I didn't have anything to eat. That night I felt faint. The whole mountain seemed to be swaying like a boat in the middle of a choppy sea. But my mind was in good shape and not the least bit afraid. The next day, I did sitting and walking meditation in the area around an old abandoned sanctuary. From where I was staying, the nearest village I could have gone to for alms was more than 3 kilometers away, so I made a vow. I won't eat unless someone brings food here. That night, I had a stomachache and felt dizzy, but not as bad as the night before. At about 5 the next morning, just before dawn, I heard huffing and panting sounds outside the sanctuary. At first I thought it was a tiger, but as I listened carefully, it sounded more like a human being. That side of the mountain, though, was very steep. Not too steep to climb up, but I can guarantee that it was too steep to go down. So who would be coming up here? I was curious, but didn't dare leave the sanctuary or my umbrella tent until it was light outside. When dawn finally came, I went outside, and there, by the side of the sanctuary, was an old woman, about 70, sitting with her hands raised in respect. She had some rice wrapped in a banana leaf that she wanted to put in my bowl. She also gave me 2 kinds of medicine, some roots and pieces of bark. Take this medicine, she said, grind it down and eat it, while making a wish for your health, and your stomachache will go away. At the time, I was observing the monk's discipline very strictly, and so, because she was a woman, didn't dare say more than a few words to her. After I had finished eating, 1 lump of red glutinous rice and the roots and bark, I chanted some blessings for her and she left, disappearing down the west side of the mountain. At about 5 in the afternoon, a person came to the top of the mountain with a letter from me, from Ajahn. The letter said, "Come back right away. I have to leave Wat Chedi Luang tomorrow morning because tomorrow evening the express train from Bangkok will arrive." I hurried down from the mountain, but night fell as I reached Pha Heo, Glen Forest village, so I spent the night in the cemetery there. When I arrived at Wat Chedi Luang the next day, Ajahn had already left. I asked around, but no one seemed to know where he had gone, leaving me with no idea of where or how to find him. I had an inkling that he had headed north for Keng Tung, which meant I would have to leave for Keng Tung right away. But I couldn't yet, because there were 2 things Ajahn had said to me during the rainy season. 1. I want you to help me in the steps of the practice because I can't see anyone else who can. At the time I had no idea of what he meant and didn't pay it much attention. 2. The Chiang Mai area has been home to a great number of sages ever since the distant past. So before you leave the area, I want you to go stay on top of Doi Khao Mo in Buab Thong Cave and in Chiang Dao Cave. After staying a few days at Wat Chedi Luang, I left for Doi Saket district, where I stayed in Tam Mead, Dark Cave, near Myang Aum village. This was a strange and remarkable cave. On top of the mountain was a Buddha image. From what period, I couldn't say. In the middle of the mountain, the ground opened down into a deep chasm. Going down into the chasm, I came to a piece of teakwood placed as a bridge across a crevice. Edging my way across to the other side, I found myself on a wide rock shelf. As I walked on a ways, it became pitch dark, so I lit a lantern and continued on. I came to another bridge, this time a whole log of teak, reaching to another rock. This is where the air began to feel chilly. Crossing this second bridge, I reached an enormous cavern. I'd say it could have held at least 3,000 people. The floor of the cavern was flat with little waves, like ripples on water. Shooting straight up from the middle of the floor was a spectacular stalagmite, as white as a cumulus cloud, 8 meters tall, and so wide it would have taken 2 people to put their arms around it. Around the stalagmite was a circle of small round bumps, like the bumps in the middle of gongs, each about 1/2 meter tall. Inside the circle was a deep flat basin. The whole area was dazzling white and very beautiful. The air, though, was close, and daylight didn't penetrate. Ajahn had told me that Nagas came here to worship. The stalagmite was their chedi I had wanted to spend the night, but the air was so close I could hardly breathe, so I didn't dare stay. I walked back out of the cave. This mountain was about 3 kilometers from the nearest village. The people in the area said that at the beginning of the rains retreat, the mountain would give out a roar. Any year the roar was especially loud, there would be good rain and abundant harvests. That day, I went back to stay in a village on the border of Doi Saket district. After resting there a few days, I walked on to Ban Pong, where I met a monk named Kien, who had once stayed with Ajahn Mun. I asked if he knew where Ajahn Mun had gone, but his answer was no, so I talked him into returning with me to explore Doi Saket district. We went to spend a night in a cave in the middle of the jungle, far away from any habitation. The cave was called Buab Thong, Golden Gourd, Cave. This was because down in the cave was a place where fool's gold had seeped through a crack into the bottom of a pool of water. To reach the cave, you had to go through 10 kilometers of virgin forest. The people of the area claimed that there was a fierce spirit living in the cave. Whoever tried to spend the night there, they said, would be kept awake all night by the feeling that someone was stepping on his legs, his stomach, his back, etc., which had everyone afraid of the place. When I heard this, I wanted to test the truth of the rumor myself. Ajahn Mun himself had told me that Bhikkhu Chai once came to this cave to spend the night, but couldn't get any sleep because he kept hearing the sound of someone walking in and out of the cave all night long. It was a very deep cave, but still, Ajahn Mun had told me to come here and spend the night. The outcome of my stay was that there was nothing out of the ordinary. We didn't encounter anything unusual at all. After leaving the cave, we went down to stay at a spot where we met another monk named Chui. After talking a while, we seemed to hit it off well, so I invited him to come with me and wander some more around the Doi Saket area. As for Phra, he left us and returned to Ban Pong. One day, as I was wandering with Phra Chui, some villagers built a little place for us to stay in the middle of a large cemetery. The cemetery was full of graves and dotted with the remains of old cremation fires. White, weathered bones were all over the place. Phra Chui and I stayed there for quite a long time. After a while, some villagers came and invited Phra Chui to go stay in another spot, which meant that I had to stay on in the cemetery alone. There were the remains of an old cremation fire about 6 meters from where I was staying. A few days later, well before dawn, a villager came with a little cone of flowers and incense, saying that he was going to bring someone to stay with me as my disciple. I thought to myself, at least now I'll be a little less lonely. I had been feeling scared for quite a few days running, to the point that every time I sat in meditation, I'd start feeling numb all over. Later that morning, after my meal, a large group of villagers came, bringing a corpse with them. The corpse hadn't been placed in a coffin, but was simply wrapped in a cloth. As soon as I saw it, I told myself, you're in for it now. If I were to leave, I'd lose face with the villagers, but the idea of staying on didn't appeal to me either. Then the realization hit me. The corpse was probably my disciple. The villagers started the cremation that afternoon at about 4, not too far from where I was staying, giving me a very good view of the corpse. When it caught fire, its arms and legs started sticking up into the air, as yellow as if they had been smeared with turmeric. By evening, the body had fallen apart at the waist. It was still black in the flames. Just before nightfall, the villagers returned home, leaving me all by myself. I hurried back to my banana leaf hut and sat in meditation, ordering my mind not to leave the hut, to the point where my ears went blank. I didn't hear any sound at all. My mind still had a certain amount of self-awareness, but no perception of where I was, of courage, of fear, or of anything at all. I stayed this way until daybreak, when Phra Chui happened back. Now that I had a companion, I felt a little bit more secure. Phra Chui had a habit of sitting in the hut with me and having Dhamma talks. He'd do the talking, I'd do the listening, but I could tell from the tone of his voice that he wasn't all he made himself out to be. Once a villager came and asked him, "Are you afraid of the dead?" Phra Chui didn't say yes or no. All he said was, "What's there to be afraid of? When a person dies, there isn't anything left at all. Why, you yourself can eat dead chickens, dead ducks, dead cows, and dead water buffaloes without a second thought." That was the sort of thing he'd always be saying. I thought to myself, what a show-off. He doesn't want other people to know he's afraid. Well, tomorrow we'll have to see just how brave he really is. It so happened that a villager had come to invite one of us to accept donations at his home. Phra Chui and I agreed that I would accept the invitation while he stayed to watch over the hut I left with the villager. But when I returned the next day, Phra was gone. I learned that late the night before, after I had left, one of the villagers had brought the body of a dead girl to bury in the cemetery Phra. Seeing this, immediately gathered his umbrella tent, his bowl and robes, and ran away in the middle of the night. From that moment on, I parted ways with Phra. I headed back to Ban Pong, where I spent a few nights with Phra Kien, and then went on to a township called Hui Am Kyo, the encircling crystal stream. There, I was told, were the ruins of an old temple, with lots of old Buddha images. Hearing this, I wanted to go have a look. By this point, I had gotten really fed up with lay people and monks. I no longer wanted to live with the human race. The one thought in my mind was to go off and live alone on a mountaintop. So, when I reached Hui Am Kyo, I stopped eating food and began eating only leaves, so that I wouldn't need to be bothered with human beings anymore. This turned out to be a fine spot, secluded and quiet, with a shallow stream meandering all around. One night while I was sitting in meditation with my eyes closed in a little dark hut, it seemed to me that a brilliant ball of light, about 1.5 meters in diameter, came shooting out of the mountaintop and settled down next to the hut where I was staying. So I sat there meditating until dawn. I felt as if my breath had stopped. I was absolutely still, feeling free and at ease, and not the least bit sleepy. A few days later, I moved down to an island formed by the course of the stream. A villager nearby, on his own initiative, had built me a little hut there. The floor was just off the ground, and the walls were made of banana leaves. When I moved into the hut, I resolved to make an all-out effort in my meditation. I went without sleep and ate very little, only 4 handfuls of leaves a day. The first day, I felt fine and there were no incidents. The second day, at about 9 p.m., after I had said my chants and finished my walking meditation, I lay back for a little rest, letting my thoughts wander, and fell asleep. I dreamed that a woman came to me. She was plump, fair and good-looking, and was wearing a blouse and an old-fashioned skirt. Her name was Sida, she said. She was still single, and she wanted to come live with me. I had the feeling that she wanted a husband, so I asked her, "Where do you live?" "On top of a tall mountain," she answered. "It's a large place with lots of houses. Life is easy there. Please be my husband." I refused. She started pleading with me in all sorts of ways, but I stood my ground, so she suggested that we simply become lovers. Still, I wouldn't yield. In the end, when she could see that she wasn't going to get her way with me, we agreed to respect each other as good friends, and when we had reached an understanding, she said goodbye and vanished. The next day, at about 2 p.m, I bathed in the stream at a spot where a log had fallen across the water. One of the villagers had told me that this was a very important stream, that there was a small chedi at its source. The strange thing about the chedi was that sometimes it was visible, sometimes it wasn't. Listening to the story, though, I hadn't paid any attention to it. Before taking my bath, I took some rocks and dammed up the stream so that it would flow over the log and I would have an easier time bathing. After my bath, I went and left the rocks where they were. That evening, after I had finished my chants and my walking meditation, a little after 9 p.m, I lay down for a short rest, meditating all the while. And another incident occurred. I felt as if someone were rubbing my legs with his hands, making me feel numb first up to my waist and then all the way to my head. I had almost no sense of feeling at all and thought I was going to lose consciousness. So I sat right up and entered concentration, my mind absolutely still, clear and bright. I decided that if this was death, I'd be willing to go. The one other thought that occurred to me was that I was going to pass out because I had been living on nothing but leaves. As soon as my awareness was in place, it started expanding itself out through my body, and the feeling of numbness gradually began to dissipate, like clouds when they float past the light of the sun, until there was no trace of numbness left at all. My mind returned to normal, and then a light went shooting out from it, focusing on the log where I had bathed in the stream, telling me to get the rocks out of the way because the stream was a path the spirits took. So when I awoke next morning, I went to the stream and removed the rocks, letting the water flow as before. That night, it seemed as if there were going to be another incident. Something struck the wall of my hut and shook it, But then, that was all I lay down to meditate because I was feeling weak, and as I began to doze off, I had a dream. Herds of strange-looking animals, about the size of pigs, were coming down from the waterfall at the source of the stream. Each had the bushy tail of a squirrel and the head of a goat. Huge swarms of them were coming down the stream, passing the spot where I was sleeping. After a few moments, I saw a woman, about 30, wearing an indigo blouse and indigo skirt, reaching just a little below her knees. She was carrying something, I don't know what you'd call it, in her hand, and she said that she was the spirit residing in the waterfall, and that she had to go down to the sea like this constantly. Her name was Nangjan. For the next few nights, I was very earnest in my meditation, but there were no more incidents. After a while, I returned to Bampong to a spot where Ajahn Mun had once stayed, and there ran into Phra again. We decided that we would have to go together and search for Ajahn Mun until we found him. So, after saying goodbye to the villagers there, we set out for Chengdao, Star City, cave. Before reaching Chengdao Mountain, we climbed up to stay in a small cave where Ajahn Mun had once stayed, and then went on, reaching Chengdao Cave the 12th day of the waxing moon, the 3rd lunar month, February 6th. We made an all-out effort to meditate both day and night. On the night of the full moon, Magha Puja, I decided to sit in meditation as an offering to the Buddha. A little after 9 p.m., my mind became absolutely still. It seemed as if breath and light were radiating from my body in all directions. At the moment, I was focusing on my breath, which was so subtle that I scarcely seemed to be breathing at all. My heart was quiet, my mind still. The breath in my body didn't seem to be moving at all. It was simply quiet and still. My mind had completely stopped formulating thoughts. How all my thoughts had stopped, I had no idea. But I was aware, feeling bright, expansive and at ease, with a sense of freedom that wiped out all feeling of pain. After about an hour of this, teachings began to appear in my heart. This, in short, is what they said. Focus down and examine becoming, birth, death, and ignorance to see how they come about. A vision came to me, as plain as if it were right before my eyes. Birth is like a lightning flash. Death is like a lightning flash. So I focused on the causes leading to birth and death, until I came to the word avidya, ignorance. Ignorance of what? What kind of knowing is the knowing of ignorance? What kind of knowing is the knowing of knowledge? I considered things in this manner, back and forth, over and over until dawn. When it all finally became clear, I left concentration. My heart and body both seemed light, open and free. My heart, extremely satisfied and full.